We live, baby. We live, baby. Let's get some people up in here, man. Let YouTube do its thing. Send out some notifications. Then we gonna rock. We gonna roll with Mr. Ballin'. You feel me? There it is. Yo. Looks like YouTube send out that notification. What up, Brian? What up, man? I hope everybody's day is going swell. I wanted to hop on live. Usually I go live kind of later when I do go live. Usually I go live like 6 my time. Kind of had a rough day, so I was like, man, let me just go ahead, talk to my people, kick it with my people, man. What up, Jessica? What up, Billy? What up, Melissa? What up, everybody in the chat? So we got Mr. Ballin', hiker gets eaten alive and lives. That's wild. That's a crazy ass fucking title. I can't wait to jump up in it, man. Shout out to everybody in the chat that's coming through and kicking it with me. Let's jump up in it.
In order to appreciate today's story, I actually have to give something away right now, and that is the main character survives. The reason I have to tell you that is because during this story, there is a really intense event that happens, and I use really specific descriptions for how something looked, how something felt, how something smelled, and if you didn't know, I was pulling that from the survivor who lived to tell the tale, you might think I was just making it up, but I'm not. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, the next time the like button asks you to pick up some cereal for them, say yes, and then go to the store and buy the big single biscuit shredded wheat cereal. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Love Mr. Ballin', man.
On July 19th, 2013, 49-year-old Matt Dyer climbed on board a tiny 19-seat Twin Otter airplane that was parked on the tarmac of the Montreal International Airport in Canada. Matt was about to take off on the first of 2 flights that would take him and 7 other adventurous people deep into one of the most remote and wild regions in North America. For Matt, this trip was going to be the most amazing journey of his life. He had seen the ad for this 2-week-long expedition about a year earlier when he was looking through a magazine put out by an environmental organization called the Sierra Club. Now, even though Matt was a lawyer, he didn't make much money. He lived in this tiny town in central Maine where he made a living by offering either free or very low-cost legal assistance for some of the state's poorest residents. But Matt was an avid outdoorsman, and when he saw the opportunity to explore one of Canada's newest national parks that was so far north it was practically in the Arctic Circle, he decided the hefty $6,000 price tag was well worth it. 2.5 hours later, after flying over 900 miles due north away from the airport in Montreal, the Twin Otter airplane that Matt and the others were riding on touched down on a narrow gravel landing strip situated between this huge forest on a mountainside and a river on the other side. After climbing off the plane with all of their equipment, Matt and the 7 others hustled their way over to the stretch of flimsy plywood buildings that lined the runway. These buildings and this entire area they were in was not a part of this new national park they were going to. This was like their staging area to prepare and get ready before catching another flight that would bring them into the park. And so Matt and the 7 other people he was with, which included the 2 trip leaders from the Sierra Club, they would stay at this temporary base camp for the next couple of days, going over their hiking routes and talking about emergency procedures and protocols. And then after those 2 days were up, the group felt like they were ready. And so the group packed up all their things and they boarded the tiny float plane out on the water that would take them to their final destination, this new Canadian national park, better known as the Torngat Mountains. 45 minutes later, the pilot of the float plane began to descend through the clouds to make their landing on a little water inlet. And as the pilot did that, Matt and the 7 others were able to look out the window and actually see the Torngat Mountains for the first time. Now, all of them had seen dozens and dozens of pictures of this area, but seeing it for the first time in person was still shocking. The area looks like an alien planet. The wilderness in and around the Torngats is not the same kind of wilderness we think of when we think about going hiking in the forest or going camping or something. No, the wilderness in the Torngats is primordial. It's like you're looking out at a place from the very beginning of time, like dinosaurs should be walking around this area. As far as Matt could see, in any direction were these huge, jagged mountains that had been carved out of the earth by glaciers hundreds of thousands of years ago. And those same glaciers had created hundreds of waterways between the mountains called fjords that almost looked like blue-veined fingers. And even from high up in the plane, Matt could look down and the water of these fjords were so clear that he could see these speckled backs of brown trout swimming beneath the surface. But while this landscape was undoubtedly spectacularly beautiful and pristine and totally incredible, it was equal parts unwelcoming to people. There are no roads in the Torngats, there's no campsites, there's no facilities, there's no internet, there's no cell phone, and the weather is unbelievably harsh.
Wait, there's no campsites, so how are you supposed to... See, man? I can't do it.
Spectacularly beautiful and pristine and totally incredible. It was equal parts unwelcoming to people. There are no roads in the Torngats, there's no campsites, there's no facilities, there's no internet, there's no cell phone, and the weather is unbelievably harsh. It's freezing cold and wet most of the time, and then even when it's a little bit warm and a little bit nice there, the weather can change in an instant and
why would you want to
freezing
go
cold
there?
And wet all over again. And so, as such, the handful of visitors that go into this area every year are expected to be 100% self-reliant, because this really is one of the most dangerous wild regions in the world. But for Matt, as he looked out his window and surveyed this landscape, he wasn't second-guessing his decision to go into this hostile environment. No. I mean, the reason he was willing to fork over all that money to go on this trip is because he really wanted to experience extreme wilderness firsthand. And so finally, the pilot of the float plane came into land on this little water inlet, and then the pilot ferried the craft over to this beach, and then Matt and the 7 others piled off onto land with all of their things, and then as the pilot turned around and left, the 2 Sierra Club trip leaders, a 61-year-old man named Rich Gross and a 60-year-old woman named Marta Chase, told the group to pick up their things and follow them. And so Rich and Marta led the hikers about 500 feet away from where they had just been dropped off, up to this slightly elevated, mostly flat area that kind of overlooked the fjord and had this incredible view of all the mountains around them. Now, unlike the temporary base camp they had been at for the past couple of days, this camp was nowhere near any forests. They were basically on a wide open plain that kind of went right up into these mountains. So it's very wide open where they're staying. And so after Rich and Marta instructed the group where to set up their tents, Matt and the others got to doing that, and then after they were all set up, Rich and Marta put a small electric fence around the perimeter of their tents to keep any nosy animals out, and then the group headed up a little bit higher on this mountain near them to take their first group photo. And in this photo, they all look so happy and so excited for what's to come. And over the next couple of days, their trip would go exactly to plan. During the daytime hours, they would hike all of their pre-planned hiking routes all over the mountains and down near the water, and at night they would eat their food and drink fresh water from the fjord and swap stories from back home. But their perfect trip was about to become a nightmare.
Goddamn grizzly bears. That's what I'm thinking. Big ass
I've been
grizzly
married
or
to my
something.
wife, Amanda, for nearly 12 years, and I just love her so much. She's so thoughtful, so kind, an amazing mother, and so this Christmas, I wanted to get her something extra special to show her how much I care. And what's more special than a pet, middle-aged, rabid skunk? And so me and old Lungy hopped on my nuclear-powered laptop and began slapping away at the keys to navigate to an online vendor that sold rabbit
I wonder how he comes up with
as soon as
these
I clicked
ads,
on the
bruh.
link, www.weselllrabbitskunksandalsopudding.com, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. That website was riddled with malware, and so immediately my laptop began to melt down and literally exploded. Luckily, Lungy shielded me from the blast, and then after the nuclear winter had subsided,
Hey, I feel you. I don't like going out in the forest
and
and
then after
stuff.
the nuclear
I'm good,
winter
bro.
had
I stay my
subsided,
ass home.
Lungy put on his traditional gakti and he said, Lopeta uden drayekeshen, ayutaninen, rokeshta roidi NordVPN, which of course in Finnish means stop causing nuclear explosions. Sign up for NordVPN. A VPN, or virtual private network, is a service that keeps you safe while you browse the internet. And NordVPN is the brand name in the space. Not only will NordVPN keep all of your information safely behind their wall of next-generation encryption, but also, most importantly, they will block malware hosting websites along with annoying ads and botnet control. So, if you're tired of your Christmas shopping turning into nuclear explosions, then take Lungy's advice and sign up for NordVPN today. Right now, you can get a 2-year plan at a huge discount, plus 4 additional months for free when you go to nordvpn.com/MrBallin. And it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/MrBallin, or click the link in the description below. Okay, back to the story.
What up, Mile High? Shout out to my brother.
In the early evening hours of Tuesday, July 23rd, so 2 days after the group arrived in the Torngat Mountains, Matt and the others returned from one of their hikes. Now, the day had been cold and rainy, but the group was in good spirits. This was their last day at this particular camping spot. The next morning, they were going to pack up and head farther inland to their next camping spot. After Matt and the others had put their gear back inside of their tents, they came back out to see that Rich and Marta, the 2 trip leads, had organized a special feast for the group to celebrate the successful beginning of their trip. And so the group all sat around eating salami and crackers and drinking rum mixed with lemonade as they talked excitedly about the next couple of days and what they could expect. At some point during the festivities, Matt was tired, and so he broke away from the group. He climbed back inside of his tent, got inside of his sleeping bag, and before long, he was fast asleep. A few hours later, around 3:30 in the morning, Matt suddenly woke up. He had no idea what had woken him up, and so for a second, he just lay there listening to the outside world and just kind of staring straight up. Now, the moon was out that night, so there was some illumination, and as he looked straight up at the underside of his tent, he sees this huge figure move across the side of his tent and then stop right up.
See, that's that bullshit, man. That's that bullshit I be telling y'all about, man. All this hiking, this forest stuff. I want to go in the Amazon and do this and do that. Nah, man, stay your happy ass home, bro. Everything out there wants to eat you. And I understand people that go out there are like, yeah, like, you know, I do it and I'm okay with nature taking its course, you know, and whatever. Because you're in their element. I get it. But you see a big, I'm assuming it's like a bear, like a grizzly bear or something. I'm just assuming it's a grizzly or something like that, man. But you see this big ass silhouette of an animal, like you can't fight that, bro. Like you got no weapons. You out here with your bare hands in their element. Like what like no, bro. Like that's something straight out of a horror movie. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You see this figure, like nah, bro.
On top of him. And then before Matt's brain could process what was happening, this huge figure began pressing down on the fabric of Matt's tent. And so he's seeing his tent collapsing in on him. Matt's not doing anything. He's not saying anything. He's
That's
just
a scary
watching in
feeling.
horror. And then suddenly the tent rips open and these 2 arms reach into the tent and they grab at Matt. And Matt threw his hands up in defense and screamed out for help. And as he did that, he suddenly felt this vice-like grip on the top of his head, and then before long, he was being pulled out of the hole in his tent out into the night. And as Matt is being dragged along on the ground, having no idea what's going on, he can't move. All he can hear is this crunching sound, which he would later find out was the sound of his skull and jaw breaking.
Oh,
and he started
no, bro. What? What? You're hearing your own body break like that? Oh, see? That's, nah, fam. That don't sound fun. Like that, oh, my heart.
to smell this horrible rotten fish smell, and then he felt what felt like saliva coming over his face. And then Matt began kind of trying to look around because he couldn't really move his head, and he noticed all he could see was white fur. And it was then that Matt realized he was in the jaws of one of the world's most powerful and deadliest predators. Standing 10 feet tall on its hind legs and weighing as much as 1,700 pounds, the North American polar bear sits right on top of
I knew it had to be some kind of bear. I knew it. And I hear polar bears are like hella smart too. Like, that's see, you look at that thing, dude. 10 feet tall. You dealing with Shaq. Like, no.
of the Arctic food chain. And now this apex predator was dragging Matt by the skull down to the beach where Matt knew he would be eaten, even if Matt was still alive when the eating began. When the bear first ripped open Matt's tent and bit down on the top of his skull, Matt let out that scream, and it actually woke up the entire camp. And one of the first people to emerge from their tents to see what was going on was one of the trip leaders, Marta. And so she jumps out of her tent, and just 3 feet away from her, she sees this huge polar bear on its hind legs.
Let me ask y'all a question. What do you do in that situation? You see your partner, like your homie, you feel me? Someone that you, well, I wouldn't say probably like just someone like a stranger, whatever the case is. You see someone that you flew in with to this damn island getting ate alive by this thing. What do you do? What do you do? Because me personally, you got to take that L. Like, what you want me to do? Fight a polar bear? Like, no. I'm not Superman, bro. I'm like, I got no powers. I'm just a random, no. Like, I'm not doing it. What do you do in that situation? What do you do? The feeling of helplessness must be so crazy, G. Like that feeling of just like, I can't do nothing. Like there's nothing I can do. This person is, you feel me? They about to go see God. Like, what do you do? What do you do, bro?
Diving into the tent to get after Matt. And so Marta instinctively yells out to Rich to get his flare gun, and she dove back into her tent to retrieve her own flare gun. But by the time she and Rich had both emerged, gun in hand, this polar bear had already dragged Matt 200 feet away from the camp. And by this point, the other hikers in the group had also emerged from their tents, and after realizing what was going on, they just stood there, absolutely paralyzed with shock, staring at this bear dragging one of their companions down to the beach to be killed. Then, after Rich fired his flare gun generally in the direction of the bear, it kind of snapped the group out of their paralysis, and then moments later, they were all screaming and banging pots and pans to try to terrify the bear into releasing Matt from its jaws. Matt couldn't hear the sounds of his companions calling out to try to save him, nor did Matt feel any pain. He was in shock. The only thing going through Matt's head as he was being dragged along the ground to the beach was, I'm going to die. I'm either going to die on the way to the beach, or when I get there, then when the bear starts eating me, I'm going to die. And when he thought about this, it was with a kind of eerie, calm detachment. Like he wasn't sad or mad. It was just kind of a fact. This was going to happen. But as Matt was kind of making peace with his reality, Rich fired that flare gun shot, and that ball of chemical fire exploded basically right in front of the polar bear's face. And the polar bear, who was startled by the flare, instinctively whipped its head to the side, up, and then down again, and it didn't let go of Matt. And so Matt was whipped like a rag doll up, and then was slammed down into the ground.
Oh, that bear is
and
dedicated.
When Matt hit the ground, he heard the sound of his neck breaking. But as
oh my God, bro. Oh my God. At that point, I already came to terms with, look, I'm going to see God. You feel me? Like, I came to terms with it at that point. I would have been like, y'all just leave me, bro. Like, cause I'm not gonna live all fucked up. Like, I'm not doing it. I'm not gonna live all tore up and stuff. Like, you trying to save me. Like, at that point, just let this bear finish what he came to do. I came to terms with it. You know, like, nah, that's crazy. His neck was breaking because the bear was just ragdoll. Nah, fam.
Matt was laying there,
Let me
the
be.
bear released him from its jaws, and then behind Matt, the bear turned around and began walking away. And so Matt could hear the sound of its big paws moving away from him, and suddenly Matt's thinking, oh my god, I might survive this. And so he tried to lay as still as he possibly could so as not to attract any attention, and he began repeating in his head over and over and over again, please bear, go away, please bear, go away. But as if out of a horror movie, as Matt is laying there repeating this phrase, he hears the sound of this bear stopping, turning around, and start moving back towards him. And so Matt's just thinking, okay, it's gonna come back over here, it's gonna bite my head, and that's the end. But luckily, Rich, by this point, one of the trip leads, had run down closer to the beach, reloaded his flare gun, and right as this bear was going to bite Matt again, Rich had fired that flare, and once again, the chemical fire had kind of exploded right near the bear, causing it to get startled. It turned around, it ran off, and this time the bear did not return. It would turn out Rich and Marta, the two trip leaders from the Sierra Club, had chosen a location for this campsite that was so heavily trafficked by polar bears, it was referred to as a polar bear highway. When all of the hikers, which included Marta and Rich, had been given their safety brief when they were staying in those plywood structures at that base camp near the runway, well, part of the brief was whenever you make camp in the Torngots, you want to be at least a quarter mile away from water. Go way inland because the polar bears hunt and fish and walk around right along the edge of these fjords. But despite all 7 members of this Sierra Club expedition being experienced wilderness backpackers, none of them really appreciated just how dangerous it was to be camping or even hiking around in known polar bear territory. And so
why would you pick a spot where you know there's like a ton of polar bears that just go there and hunt? Like, you putting my life in danger? Like, that's what I'm hearing. That's what I heard is your life ain't shit. Like, that's what I heard. Nah, I did not pay for you to put me with all these polar bears, bro. And then you gonna say, like, yeah, you gotta stay a quarter mile from the water and they won't come up here. False. Cap. You just lied to me. Put my life in danger. You lied to me. Like, bro, nah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
So this is why they ultimately ignored the safety brief and set up their first camp just a couple hundred feet away from the water's edge. And even prior to the attack on Matt, when the group literally saw polar bears wandering around near their camp and even at one point had to fire their flare guns at the polar bears to get them to leave, the group still decided it was best to stay at this particular campsite. Perhaps they believed their electric fence they had set up around the perimeter of their tents would protect them from these polar bears, but obviously that had not been the case. The bear that attacked Matt had been totally unaffected by their fence. Matt would survive this attack, but really only because one of the members of the expedition happened to be a medical doctor, and so they were able to stabilize Matt until help arrived. Matt's injuries were extensive. They included a broken skull, a broken jaw. He had slash marks and puncture wounds all over his head and his neck, and all of those wounds got horribly infected.
Wow.
And also his voice was permanently changed as well because the bear also slashed his vocal cords.
Oh
Following
my
the attack on
God!
Matt, Parks Canada, which is the agency that oversees all of Canada's national parks, including Torngots, has mandated that any organization going into Torngots National Park has to have a polar bear protection plan in place. As for Matt, he does not make a big deal about his near-death experience. In fact, he kind of makes light of it and sometimes even makes jokes about it. As for the polar bear that attacked him, Matt holds no ill will. If anything, the attack has made him more interested and appreciative of the apex predator. In August of 2014, so 11 months after Matt's brush with death, he returned to the Torngots and even visited the actual site of the attack, perhaps to get closure. Except this time, he was in the company of an armed polar bear expert.
Man, that's crazy,
So-
man. Hey, good for him, though, you know? Good for him. He a thug. He took it like a champ. Good for him. He a gangster. You feel me? Because, I mean, me personally, I would never have came back with an armed guard or anything. Nah, I would never have came back. Shit. Probably wouldn't step outside forever. Honestly, that's crazy, though, man. I'm happy that he survived. You know, that sounds like one hell of a story to tell at like a party or something. You know, that's wild, bro. Good for him. Shout out to that, man. But we got another Mr. Ballin episode. This hospital has a disturbing secret. Let's jump up in it.
In 2015, a startling discovery was made inside of this off-limits area inside of a prominent South African hospital. Now, at the time, no one really understood what this discovery meant, and so eventually people just kind of forgot about it and moved on. Until 2 years later, when another eerily similar discovery was made inside of another prominent South African hospital in one of their off-limits areas. I can't believe this story has not gotten more press because one, it's recent, and two, the implications of these discoveries are mind-boggling. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please put coyote urine in the like button's apple juice. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Missing patients?
On October 4th, 2017, a 61-year-old father of 6 named Tatike Katsai arrived at a hospital in Stellenbosch, which is one of the richest towns in South Africa. Tatike, who lived in the area with his family, had been dealing with some stomach issues over the last several months, and so this day he was finally going in to have abdominal surgery to hopefully alleviate those issues. So, after entering the building, Tatike was checked in, and then before long he was transferred to the operating room where surgeons got to work on him. After the surgery was over, Tatike was transferred to a recovery room in the hospital where he was scheduled to stay for at least a couple of days so the doctors and nurses could watch over him while he recovered and make sure there was no complications from the procedure. And so, on the afternoon of October 4th, Tatike just kind of lounged around inside of his recovery room. He couldn't really do anything because of the incisions on his stomach, and so he mostly just laid in his bed, he watched TV, he relaxed, he ate, and then at some point, some of his family members came into the hospital and they visited with him as well. By the end of that day, the day of his surgery, Tatike was definitely sore from the incisions, but overall, he was in good spirits, and to the medical staff, it seemed very likely that his surgery was a success. Early the next morning, at around 5:15 a.m., one of the nurses in the hospital went to Tatike's room to check on him. And when she went inside, Tatike was awake, he was alert, he seemed totally normal. And so after a brief conversation, the nurse told Tatike that she was just going to get him some fresh linens to make up his bed. And so Tatike nodded a thank you to her, and then the nurse, she turned away from Tatike, who's in his bed. She stepped out of the one door in the room into the hallway. She grabbed fresh linens off of a cart, and then she turned back around and went back into Tatike's room, except now Tatike was not in his bed. So the nurse immediately thought, okay, well then Tatike must have gone into his bathroom because the door was shut. He must be in the bathroom. And so just kind of reflexively, the nurse walked over to Tatike's now empty bed and replaced the linens. And then when she was done, she just looked at the bathroom door inside of his room, expecting Tatike to come outside any minute. But after a couple of minutes passed and Tatike had still not come out of the bathroom, the nurse decided to go over and just knock. And so she walked over, she knocked on the bathroom door and just kind of called out, hey, is everything okay in there? But there was no answer. And so the nurse eventually just tried the handle, and when she saw it was open, she called out that she was coming inside. She opened up the bathroom door, and it was empty. And so the nurse, she whipped her head around and looked back out at the room where Tatike should have been, and she saw, he's not on the bed, he's not under the bed, he's not anywhere in this room. Where could he have possibly gone? And she's thinking to herself, the only door out of this room is into the hallway, the same door that she had used to go out and get the linens. And if somehow Tatike had ran out of that door in the few seconds that her back was turned from Tatike, she certainly would have heard him or seen him, because again, she was right outside the door and only outside of his room for a couple of seconds. Not to mention the fact Tatike has major incisions on his stomach and could barely stand, let alone walk or run. And so, totally baffled, this nurse ultimately left the room and went and told her superiors.
Huh.
Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. In 2017,
this is
I
very
left the
interesting. I'm
military,
intrigued.
and pretty much right away, I fell apart. The military had provided a lot of structure in my life, and so suddenly not having that structure made me feel like I was lost. Pretty soon, I began resenting all the people around me just because they seemed happy and I wasn't. I sort of figured that these feelings of resentment and unhappiness would just kind of go away on their own, but they didn't.
What up,
Eventually,
Eric?
with some encouragement from my family and my friends, I sought out a therapist. And quickly, my therapist diagnosed me with depression, something I really did not think I was. But after the shock of the diagnosis had worn off, me and my therapist were able to kind of go back in my life and figure out what was causing me to feel the way I was feeling, and before long, having that perspective really made me feel a lot better. Look, therapy is not for everyone, but it is a great starting point for people who just kind of feel lost and don't really know where to go. And so if that's you, I would highly suggest you give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. Get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey, and then you can communicate with your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether that's text messaging, phone call, video call, chat, whatever you want. You can also switch therapists at any time for free. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/MrBallin. I've also linked them in the description below. This hospital would immediately begin looking for Tatike on the grounds of the hospital, but they would do it kind of quietly. They wouldn't call Tatike's family to tell them that, hey, we can't find him, nor would they call police. And some have speculated that either one, the hospital did not think this was an emergency and they would quickly find Tatike and that everything would be fine, or two, the hospital was just so embarrassed at the idea that they lost a patient, they didn't want anyone to know, and so that's why they didn't tell anyone. Regardless, the hospital would search for Tatike all day on the 5th, the day he went missing, and they wouldn't find him. And then the next day, the 6th, the hospital again would spend the entire day quietly searching everywhere in the hospital, but they wouldn't find him again. And so finally on the next day, the 7th, so 48 hours after Tatike had just kind of vanished inside
48
room,
hours?
the hospital would reach out to Tatike's family, and they would say to them, hey, is Tatike home with you guys? And the family was like, no, he's supposed to be with you. And so the hospital would...
Look, I get it. That's crazy. Y'all lost the patient. But it took you 48 hours to contact this person's family. And when you contact them, they're like, oh yeah, is he with you? Like, bro, what? Bro, what? That's crazy. I don't like hospitals and because stuff like this, bro. That's just wild, man.
Would say, well, he left 2 days ago, so we don't know where he is.
Like, why you didn't call me 2 days ago?
Family is horrified, not only that they were totally left in the dark, but they would find out over the course of this conversation that the hospital had not even contacted the police yet. And so the family, they reached out to the police, and then later that day, the family would meet the police at the Stellenbosch hospital, and then a very public search of the property would ensue to look for Tatike. However, again, no one could find him. Authorities would continue to search both the hospital and also the neighboring area outside of the hospital over the next couple of days, but after they continued to find absolutely nothing, the search began to wind down, and so Tatike's devastated family was left with absolutely no idea what to think or what to do. Fast forward to October 20th, so 15 days after Tatike had gone missing. And on this day, the 20th, There was a construction crew at this hospital in Stellenbosch doing some renovations. And at some point on this day, one of the workers had to climb into the ceiling of one of the floors of this hospital.
If
now,
he's in the
space
ceiling,
above
bro.
the ceiling is this tight, cramped space, almost like an attic. It's very big and wide. It's like the whole length
Don't tell me
of
he's
that
up there.
floor. And really the only people that would ever go into the ceiling are construction workers or other authorized personnel that needed to do work. It's not a place that the public would ever go into. But when one of these workers went up into the ceiling, he had a headlamp on and he's kind of looking around. He's looking for what he needs to do up there. And at some point he turns his head and his light illuminates a person sitting in the corner far away from him, way up against the side in this tiny little attic space. And it would turn out it was Tatike.
What?
And he was deceased. The hospital had absolutely no clue how Tatike could have gotten up there. Not only is it obviously not a publicly accessible area, but the actual way to get up into the ceiling, the door that leads up into the ceiling, is very difficult to find. And even if Tatike found this entrance into the ceiling, it would have been nearly impossible for him to actually get into the ceiling. Because again, this guy has serious incisions on his stomach from the surgery he got. He could barely sit up. He couldn't really walk. So the idea of him climbing and pulling himself up into the ceiling just seems impossible. Then there was the very strange autopsy results. Now, the full report has not been made public, but Tatike's family had a consultation with the hospital after the autopsy was complete, and they would go to reporters and talk about what the hospital told them. And apparently, the hospital told the family that Tatike did not die from complications from his surgery, and they heavily insinuated that Tatike did not die from natural causes. Something happened to him, and the hospital had no idea what this something was, and
Bro, where's the cameras at? Like, where's the other people? No one's seen this happening? Like, I don't understand. Like, did someone come in and then place him up there? Like, I need answers.
And that's what killed him. And the hospital also told the family that Tatike likely was dead before he went up into the ceiling.
That's crazy.
Meaning someone or something killed Tatike, and then someone or something placed him in the ceiling. Again, this is just from the family going to reporters and talking about their discussion with the hospital. The hospital's only official statement has basically been that they have cooperated with the family and they don't really know what happened to Tatike. Now, of course, this is a very strange story, but it gets even weirder. On May 10th, 2019, so about a year and a half after Tatike was found deceased in the Stellenbosch hospital ceiling, a 53-year-old father of 4 named Sandile Sibiya arrived at another hospital in South Africa. It was in a city called Durban, which is considered to be one of the nicest and wealthiest places in South Africa, similar to Stellenbosch. Sandile was a builder, and he had been working on a house when he had fallen and broken his leg. Specifically, he broke his femur bone, the bone that runs from your hip down to your knee, the big single bone in your thigh. So just for reference, if you break your femur, you can't walk. So, with some assistance from friends and family, Sandile hobbled his way into this hospital in Durban, and he began to receive care. 2 days later, on May 17th, Sandile was still in the hospital, still recovering from this broken femur, when his cousin came to visit him. The cousin said Sandile seemed totally normal, and that during this visit, Sandile told the cousin that after the cousin left, Sandile was going to be transported from this hospital to another hospital nearby, where he was going to get an x-ray of his leg, as well as talk to another orthopedic surgeon. But apparently, after this cousin left from this visit, the doctors at the Durban hospital walked into Sandile's room to take him and transport him to this other hospital, and Sandile was not in his room. Now, this hospital in Durban was known for their very tight security, and so right away, their reaction was very different than the Stellenbosch hospital.
Nah, bruh, these hospitals are playing, bro. There's some foul stuff going on with these hospitals, G. You're telling me 2 people are going missing from different... Nah, something's going on, bro. I need answers.
Reaction.
Something's going
this
on.
This hospital immediately contacted authorities and said, we are missing a patient, and they began a very public search of their hospital for Sandile. But they couldn't find him. On May 18th, so 6 days after Sandil disappeared, the hospital in Durban began to smell this horrible stench coming from one wing of their hospital. And so hospital workers would track the stench to a janitor's closet, and when they opened it up, they saw this black liquid dripping out of the ceiling, and the liquid was coming from Sandil's decomposing body that was located in the ceiling. Sandil's autopsy would be carried out very quickly. However, the results of that autopsy have never been made public, and Sandil's family has not commented on the results of this autopsy. As of today, all we know is that within a 2-year period, 2 seemingly ordinary South African men, who both could either not walk at all or who could barely walk because of their physical injuries, somehow snuck out of their hospital rooms totally undetected by staff and then wound up dead in the hospital ceiling.
Nah, bro.
Some say the men really did somehow sneak out of their own accord and decided to go into the ceiling, and that's what happened. Others say both men were murdered and then placed into the ceiling, and still others think these 2 cases are the best examples of something called spontaneous teleportation, which is the hypothetical phenomenon where a human suddenly disappears and then almost instantaneously reappears in another location. But for now, there is no official explanation, so those are all just theories. And so it's up to you to decide what you believe.
Nah, the hospital was doing some Nah, man. That hospital, bro. Those hospitals. Foul play. You telling me they teleported and then ended up somewhere? If you're gonna teleport, at least in my mind, like, you're gonna teleport somewhere else. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think you'll teleport in the same hospital. I think you'll teleport somewhere else. There's some foul stuff going on. One of these nurses or something, bro. And the fact that, like, there's no video cameras when he said this hospital was, like, highly secure. Where the video cameras at? You telling me there's no footage? There's no nothing? Like, nah, I don't believe none of that, bro. I don't believe none of that. Like, cap. Big cap, bro.
So that's gonna do it. If you got something out of today's...
Nah. What do y'all think? What do y'all think, bro? Because that's crazy. That's really wild. Like, that was a weird story. And it definitely just, like, makes you wonder, you know, because like he said, no one knows anything. Like, there's been no answers, bro. That's wild. Like, that's really, like, some unsolved mystery. Like, what's going on? Like, I need answers, G. I'm gonna have to look at that one. I'm gonna have to search that up. But I'm gonna go ahead and end this live here, man. Thank you guys for just kicking it with me. I just wanted to come on here and watch some Mr. Ballin with y'all, man. But I love you guys. We'll probably go live tomorrow with some more scary stuff, man. We'll see how I feel, though. You guys know how I get with that scary stuff, man. But I love you guys. Thank you guys for commenting, sharing, and subscribing.